You never expect to be judged the moment you walk through a door. But for some people, that judgment comes before you've even uttered a word, before anyone knows your name, your story, or your talents. And sometimes those who judge are met with the surprise of their lives. That's exactly what was about to happen. For Vincent Taylor, this moment came on a sunny Tuesday afternoon at one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. When Vincent Taylor got out of his car, the afternoon sun bathed Michigan Avenue in golden light. He was a tall man in his early 40s, very dark-skinned, broad-shouldered, and naturally commanding. But today he wasn't trying to control anything. He was just hungry. He simply wanted something to eat. Vincent had spent his morning touring construction sites around the city. Dusty, noisy places where concrete mixers churned and workers shouted to be heard over the machinery. He was dressed functionally, not fashionably. A plain gray hooded sweatshirt, comfortable jeans, and worn sneakers. He had dust on his arms and a stain on his shoulder from leaning against a steel beam. He looked a little different on the outside, but whatever the case, he was still a human being. However, he was about to experience the shock of his life. He had been passing by Maison Dorée, Golden House for years, always wanting to try it but never finding the time. Today, he suddenly decided to stop. The restaurant's reputation preceded it. Impeccable service, world-class cuisine, and an atmosphere that appealed to Chicago's elite. Now you might be asking yourself, of course you can't go there dressed like that. But there are things you don't know. Vincent pushed open the heavy glass door and entered. The interior was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a warm light over tables covered with white tablecloths. Soft classical music played in the background, and the air was filled with the faint scent of fresh flowers and expensive wine. Elegantly dressed customers sat at tables spaced perfectly apart, conversing in hushed tones. The place screamed luxury, wealth, extravagance. When Vincent entered, everyone turned their heads. He was used to being stared at, his height alone guaranteed that. But these weren't ordinary curious glances. These were different. They were judgmental. They were disapproving looks. They were condescending glances because of Vincent's clothes and skin color. A woman wearing a designer dress stared at Vincent's everyday clothes and whispered to her friend. An elderly man wearing a tailor-made suit raised his eyebrows and his gaze fell on Vincent's dusty sneakers. The whispers began quietly, but Vincent could feel them increasing. Head waiter Marcus Chen stood at the reception desk. Marcus was in his early 30s, impeccably dressed in a black waistcoat and crisp white shirt. His hair was slicked back, his posture was upright, and his expression held a practiced politeness that didn't quite reach his eyes. Marcus had been working at Maison Dorée for 5 years, and during that time had become very good at distinguishing who belonged here and who didn't. In his mind, the restaurant was a refuge for the refined, cultured, and wealthy. People dressed like Vincent, as if they had just stepped off a construction site, did not belong here. He definitely did not belong there. Vincent approached the stand and greeted him with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, a table for one, please," he said. Marcus did not smile. His eyes slowly drifted from Vincent's face to his sneakers, then back up again. His assessment was deliberate and dismissive. He clearly looked down on Vincent. He implied that Vincent didn't belong here. "Do you have a reservation?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp. "No, I don't. I was hoping you had a table available," Vincent replied. Marcus pretended to check his tablet, but Vincent could see that there were many empty tables in the half-empty dining room. But he wanted to find an excuse to get Vincent out of the place. "I'm afraid all our tables are full," Marcus said flatly. Vincent glanced at the empty tables in the room, then looked back at Marcus. "Are you sure? There seem to be a few empty tables," he said. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned. "Those tables are reserved," he said. But that wasn't the case. He just didn't want Vincent there. "All of them?" asked Vincent. "Yes," said Marcus, his voice now sharp. "This is a quality restaurant. Reservations are required, and there is a dress code." These last words caused a storm to break out inside Vincent. Vincent understood Marcus's intentions, but he was hungry and wanted to eat the dishes he was curious about. He needed to find a solution. "Has something like this ever happened to you before?" Despite feeling the weight of the moment, Vincent kept his expression calm. He had encountered situations like this before, places where he was judged, not by his character or achievements, but by his appearance. He usually ignored it, but today, a voice inside him was telling him to stand up for himself. "I understand you have standards," Vincent said calmly, "but I'd like to wait if a table becomes available. I really want to try the food here." Marcus's expression shifted from a professional refusal to outright contempt. "Sir, I don't think you understand. Maison Dorée caters to a specific clientele. Perhaps you would be more comfortable at one of the more casual restaurants down the street," he said, trying to send Vincent away. Nearby customers were now watching, some openly, others pretending not to notice. Vincent could feel their eyes on him, hear their whispered judgments. He had lived with this his entire life. These looks were all too familiar. "What exactly do you mean?" Vincent asked, his voice still calm but carrying weight. Marcus leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice but not enough that the nearby tables couldn't hear. "I'm saying that people who come here need to be dressed appropriately. They understand fine dining culture. This isn't a place you can just walk in off the street," he said. Vincent met Marcus's gaze. "And you're deciding that based on what I'm wearing," he replied. He knew that was true. But he wanted Marcus to realize something. "I'm deciding to uphold the standards of this establishment," Marcus said. Lisa Martinez, sitting at a nearby table, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She was watching the argument and something about it bothered her. She leaned over to her dining companion and whispered, "This is wrong. He just wants a table." Her companion, an elderly gentleman named Robert Hayes, shook his head slowly. "Marcus has always been particular, but this time it's different," he said. Vincent took a slow breath. He could feel anger simmering beneath his calm exterior, but he had learned long ago that giving in to his anger would give people like Marcus what they wanted, an excuse to validate their prejudices. He absolutely did not want to do that. Even the slightest reaction would be enough to prove them right. "I understand," Vincent said quietly. "So you're saying I don't actually belong here?" Marcus straightened up, a slight smile appearing on his face. "I'm saying it's Maison Doré's standards. If you'd like to make a reservation for another time and dress appropriately, I'd be happy to welcome you," he replied. The condescension was palpable. Vincent could see it in Marcus's expression, hear it in his tone. This wasn't about dress codes or reservations. This was about judgment. This was about a man who looked at Vincent and saw only his own assumptions. Someone who didn't belong here, who couldn't afford this place, who fell short of the restaurant's standards. Vincent slowly shook his head. "Thank you for your time," he said. He turned to leave and heard Marcus mutter loudly enough to be heard as he walked away, "Some people don't know their place." Vincent stopped. The words hung in the air like a slap. Lisa, sitting at her table, suddenly stood up. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "You can't talk to people like that," she protested loudly. Marcus turned to her, his expression shifting to practice politeness. "Ma'am, I'm just upholding the restaurant's standards," he replied. "But that wasn't the point." "No," Lisa interrupted. "You're being disrespectful. There's a difference." Robert Hayes nodded in agreement. "She's right. This has nothing to do with standards. It's about how you choose to treat this man," he said. Marcus's face flushed, but before he could respond, Vincent raised his hand. "It's okay," Vincent said calmly. "Thank you for your support, but I don't have to stay somewhere I'm not welcome," he replied. Vincent didn't want to compromise his dignity. He walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the now silent restaurant. Everyone's eyes followed him. Some looked at him with sympathy. Others seemed relieved to see him leave. Marcus, however, stood at the reception desk, arms crossed, a satisfied smile on his face. The pride of having achieved the desired result was evident, but when Vincent reached the door, he stopped. He turned back, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Marcus. "You know," Vincent said, his voice easily filling the room, "I've been judged by my appearance before. This isn't new. But what surprises me is that people like you proudly display their prejudices as if they were something to be celebrated." Marcus's smirk faded. "I came here to eat," Vincent continued. "But instead, I was reminded that some people will always see what they want to see, no matter what the truth is." Everyone in the restaurant heard this conversation. He didn't wait for a response. He pushed open the door and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, leaving behind a restaurant full of people who would spend the rest of their meal wondering about the man who had just walked out. Marcus stood at the reception desk, his confidence shaken for a moment. But he quickly recovered and returned to his tablet as if nothing had happened. He stood as if he hadn't just had an argument. In his mind, he had done his job. He had protected the restaurant's image. He had upheld the standards. But what Marcus didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that Vincent Taylor wasn't just a man in a hoodie and dusty jeans. The truth was about to come out. Vincent Taylor was the owner of Taylor Hospitality Group, one of the largest restaurant investment companies in the Midwest. And Maison Doré was his latest acquisition. As Vincent walked down Michigan Avenue, his phone rang. He took it out and saw a message from his assistant. "Meeting with Maison Doré management tomorrow at 2 p.m. We look forward to your first official visit." Vincent smiled, a small, quiet smile. "Tomorrow will be a very interesting day," he said to himself. Marcus was very curious to see the look on his face when he heard the news. The next afternoon, Vincent Taylor returned to Maison Doré. This time, he was wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and shiny leather shoes. His appearance had changed, but his demeanor remained the same. Calm, confident, cool. He arrived 15 minutes early and stood outside for a while, looking at the restaurant's elegant facade. Through the windows he could see that the lunch service was in full swing. The tables were filled with smartly dressed customers, and waiters were moving gracefully between them. Vincent took a deep breath and went inside. The same crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. The same classical music played softly in the background. But today the atmosphere was different. Or perhaps Vincent was seeing it differently after yesterday's experience. At the reception, a different staff member greeted him, a young woman named Sophie. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him, and she immediately greeted him with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Maison Dorée. Do you have a reservation?" she asked. "Yes," said Vincent. "I'm here for a meeting with the management team." "Vincent Taylor," he said, giving his full name. Sophie's expression shifted from polite professionalism to something closer to respect. "Of course, Mr. Taylor. We've been expecting you. Please follow me," she said. She led him through the dining room to the private event area at the back. As they walked, Vincent saw a few familiar faces from the day before, including Lisa Martinez and Robert Hayes, who had been dining at the same table the previous day. When Lisa recognized him, her eyes widened. She leaned toward Robert and whispered something, and both of them began watching Vincent with renewed interest. They were curious about what was going to happen. Sophie opened the door to the private dining room where the management team was gathered. General Manager Catherine Wells stood at the head of the table. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Beside her sat the head chef, the assistant manager, and several senior staff members. And at the back stood Marcus Chen, looking much less confident than he had yesterday. "Mr. Taylor," Catherine greeted him warmly, extending her hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person. We've been looking forward to this," she said. Vincent shook her hand, his smile polite but reserved. "Thank you, Miss Wells. I appreciate you all taking the time," he replied courteously. When Vincent sat down at the head of the table, his eyes met Marcus's for a moment. The head waiter's face had gone pale, and Vincent could see the moment he realized who the hooded man was. "How would you feel if you were in Marcus's place?" Catherine began the meeting with a presentation on the restaurant's performance, revenues, customer satisfaction scores, and staff numbers. On paper, everything looked strong. Maison Dorée was profitable, receiving good reviews, and running smoothly. But Vincent knew the numbers only told part of the story. "Before we continue," Vincent gently interrupted, "I want to share an incident that happened yesterday." The room fell silent. Catherine looked at him curiously. "Of course, Mr. Taylor." Vincent leaned back in his chair, his gaze sweeping over the assembled team before focusing on Marcus. "Yesterday afternoon, I came to this restaurant. I was dressed casually because I had been touring construction sites all morning, and I was turned away at the door." A look of concern appeared on Catherine's face. "Turned away? By whom?" Vincent nodded toward Marcus. "By your head waiter." All eyes turned to Marcus, his face ashen. I didn't know," Marcus began, but Vincent raised his hand. "Let me finish." Vincent's voice was calm, but there was steel-like determination beneath it. "I wasn't turned away just because your restaurant was full. I wasn't turned away because of a legitimate policy. I was turned away because of my appearance. Your head waiter looked at my clothes and decided I didn't belong here." Catherine's face hardened. She turned to Marcus. "Is that true?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Sir, I was just trying to uphold the restaurant's standards." "Standards?" Vincent cut him off, his voice now sharper. "Or assumptions." The room was silent. Vincent continued, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "You looked at me and made a judgment. In that moment you decided you knew who I was, how much money I could afford, and whether I deserved to be here. And you made that decision based entirely on my appearance." Marcus's hands trembled slightly. I thought I was protecting the restaurant's image by discriminating against a customer." Vincent's voice remained calm, but the weight of his words filled the room. "Tell me, Marcus, what if I were a health inspector? What if I were a journalist and wrote a review? What if I were exactly who I am, the person who signs the paychecks?" Marcus said nothing. He bowed his head. Vincent stood up and paced slowly around the table. "But more importantly, what if I were just an ordinary person who wanted to eat? Where did you get the right to deny me that based on your prejudices?" Catherine spoke sharply. "Mr. Taylor, I assure you this does not reflect our values." "Is that so?" Vincent interrupted, turning to her. "Because yesterday Marcus made his decision in front of your staff and customers, and no one from your team objected. Not a single employee stepped in to say, 'This is wrong.'" Catherine's face flushed. Vincent continued in a measured but firm tone. "The customers raised their voices. Lisa Martinez and Robert Hayes, two customers sitting in your restaurant right now, objected to Marcus's behavior, but your employees remained silent." He paused to let his words sink in. "That tells me this isn't just about one person. It's a cultural issue, and culture starts at the top." The room fell silent, the weight of Vincent's words settling on everyone. Vincent turned to Marcus. "Yesterday, you humiliated me. You made me feel like an unwanted guest in my own establishment. But more importantly, You revealed something about yourself, a tendency to judge others based on superficial assumptions. You are not the kind of person I want representing my restaurants. Marcus raised his head, fear evident in his eyes. Please, Mr. Taylor, I'm not finished. You're not fired, Marcus. Not yet. Hope flashed across Marcus's face. But, Vincent continued, you will attend mandatory training on cultural sensitivity, unconscious biases, and excellent customer service. And you will personally apologize to all staff and customers who witnessed yesterday's incident. If you fail to complete this training, or if something like this happens again, you're gone. Understood? Marcus nodded quickly, his face a conflict of relief and embarrassment. Yes, sir. I understand. Thank you. Vincent turned to Catherine. As for the restaurant's culture, that must change. I want comprehensive training for all staff. I want clear policies that explicitly prohibit any form of discrimination. And I want accountability measures put in place so that your team knows it's their responsibility to speak up if something like this happens again. Catherine nodded seriously. Of course, Mr. Taylor. We will implement everything immediately. Vincent looked at the team in the room. Maison Doré has a strong reputation, but reputation isn't built on good food and elegant decor alone. Reputation is built on how we treat people, all people, regardless of their appearance, where they come from, or what they wear. He paused for a moment to let his words resonate. I bought this restaurant because I believed in its potential. But if we don't treat everyone who walks through our doors with respect and courtesy, that potential means nothing. This isn't just good business, it's a basic rule of humanity. Silence fell over the room as Vincent gathered his things. I'll be checking in regularly, he said. And I'll be watching to see if there's any real change. This is your chance to prove that yesterday was an exception, not the norm. With that, Vincent turned and walked out of the private dining room. Passing through the main restaurant, he noticed Lisa Martinez waving at him from her table. He walked over. Mr. Taylor, Lisa said, standing up. I just wanted to say, thank you for what you said yesterday, and I'm glad to see you here again. Vincent responded with a genuine smile for the first time since entering the restaurant. Thank you for speaking up. It was much more important than you realize. Robert Hayes extended his hand. It takes courage to stand up against injustice. You handled it with extraordinary grace. Vincent shook his hand. Grace is important, but so is responsibility. As Vincent left Maison Doré for the second time, the afternoon sun felt warmer, the air lighter. He had made his point. He had compelled people to fulfill their responsibilities. And most importantly, he had started a conversation that would reverberate throughout the restaurant and beyond. In the weeks that followed, Maison Doré underwent significant changes. The staff underwent extensive training. New policies were implemented. Marcus took his second chance seriously. He apologized publicly, completed all the training modules, and began actively working to change not only his behavior, but also his mindset. 3 months later, Vincent returned unannounced. He was wearing jeans and a casual shirt, deliberately testing whether the culture had truly changed. Sophie greeted him at the reception desk with the same warm smile she had shown him before. Mr. Taylor, what a nice surprise. A table for one? Yes, please. She led him to a table by the window, not tucked away in a corner, hidden, but right in the middle of the dining room. When Vincent sat down, Marcus approached. The expression on his face was different now, more humble, more sincere. Good day, Mr. Taylor, Marcus said, his voice respectful but not obsequious. How nice to see you again. May I recommend today's special? Vincent studied him for a moment, then nodded. Gladly, Marcus. Thank you. As Marcus walked away to place the order, Vincent looked around the restaurant. The atmosphere was different, warmer, more inclusive. He noticed different customers at various tables, the staff showing equal care and attention to everyone. This was what he had envisioned. Not perfection, because that would take time, but progress. Real, meaningful progress. When the food arrived, Vincent savored it slowly. The dishes were perfect, exactly as he had hoped. But more importantly, the experience had been what it should have been from the start. Hospitable, respectful, honorable. As he finished his meal and prepared to leave, Catherine Wells approached his table. Mr. Taylor, may I have a moment of your time? Of course. She sat down, a serious expression on her face. I wanted to thank you. What you did, holding us accountable, demanding change, was exactly what this restaurant needed. We've seen a change not only in our policies, but also in our team's approach to service. It's made us better. Vincent nodded. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. And it starts with acknowledging our shortcomings. Catherine smiled. We still have work to do, but we're committed to continuing this journey. That's all I ask, Vincent said, standing up. Keep moving forward, keep learning, and keep treating everyone who walks through that door as if they matter, because they do. As Vincent left Maison Doré that day, he felt a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with wealth or power. It came from knowing that a moment of courage, a refusal to accept injustice, had sparked real change. He would continue his journey at the restaurant, Marcus would continue to learn and grow, and hopefully, this ripple effect would extend beyond these walls, impacting other organizations, other people, and other moments when someone needed to speak up. Because that's how change happens: a conversation, a confrontation, a choice. And Vincent Taylor had made his choice.